My parents spent over $300,000 on my siblings and only gave me $8,000. But as the saying goes, you raise ravens and they'll peck out your eyes. I'm 29 years old, and right now my family is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. My wife says I should share this somewhere because keeping it to myself isn't doing anyone any good. I'm the second of 4 children. My older brother, Jonah, 32, is what's commonly known and studied as the golden child here. While he's not the only favorite, he is the worst. Then there's me, followed by my sister Rachel, 26, and the youngest, Abba, 22. For as long as I can remember, things always worked differently for me than for my siblings. Let's start with college. Jonah went to a private university that cost about $55,000 a year. My parents paid every cent of his tuition, room, and board for 4 years. That totals around $220,000. When he graduated, they also bought him a new Honda Accord as a graduation gift, which cost another $25,000. Rachel went to the same expensive private university. Same deal. My parents covered everything. 4 years all paid for. They also paid her sorority fees, spring break trips, and a study abroad program in Italy. Easily another $230,000. She also received a new car upon graduating. Abba is finishing her last year at another pricey private university. My parents have been paying for everything, including her off-campus apartment, which costs $800 a month. She drives a leased BMW that my parents pay for. They've given her around $240,000 just for education. Now for me. When I turned 18, my parents sat me down and told me they had researched my interests and found a 2-year automotive technology program at the local community college. The program cost $8,000 total. They said it was perfect for me because I had always liked working with my hands and fixing things. And when they referred to an automotive technology program, they meant studying to be a mechanic. They paid the tuition, and I lived at home for those 2 years. After graduating, I got a job at a local garage. I worked there for 3 years and saved every penny. I wanted to go back to school to get a business degree so I could open my own shop. I applied to the state university and was accepted. Tuition was $5,000 a year for residents. When I told them my plan, they said they were proud of how independent I was, but offered no financial help. I took out student loans and continued working while studying. It took me 5 years to graduate because I could only take a few classes each semester. When I finished, I owed $35,000 in student loans, all while my siblings had not a single cent of college debt. The car issue was another sore point. When I needed transportation to get to work at the garage, I had to buy my own car. I found a used one with 150,000 kilometers for $4,500. I saved for months to be able to buy it. Meanwhile, all my siblings received new cars as gifts, but what really broke everything was the weddings. Jonah got married 3 years ago. My parents spent $55,000 on his wedding, which even surprised me because I would have expected a $450,000 wedding. They paid for everything without him even asking. Rachel got married last year. Her wedding cost $50,000. My parents again paid for everything, even financing her honeymoon in Hawaii. Abba isn't engaged yet, but they've already started saving money for her wedding. Sometimes they mention it, saying they want her to have the perfect day when the time comes. Now, about my wedding. My wife and I got engaged 2 years ago. We were excited and started planning. I assumed my parents would contribute something given what they had done for my siblings. My mom commented that they trusted we would figure it out because we were very practical and good with money. We planned a small wedding. My wife's parents contributed $3,000, which was incredibly generous considering their financial situation. We spent about $10,000 total. My wife handmade the decorations. I borrowed a sound system from a friend, and the reception was catered by a family restaurant. It wasn't fancy, but it was beautiful, and everyone had a good time. The problem started at family dinners after we got married. My siblings would talk about their weddings, comparing vendors, venues, and costs. Sometimes they would make comments about how nice and quaint our event had been, emphasizing the quaint. Those comments always sounded condescending. They weren't exactly cruel, but there was a tone that suggested our wedding was inferior. The worst part was that my parents would nod along and sometimes add their own observations with words like nice or humble. The financial differences extended far beyond the big events. Every Christmas, my siblings exchange expensive gifts. Jonah spends between $200 and $300 per person. Rachel does the same. Abba, even as a student, gives generous gifts that I know my parents finance. My wife and I stick to a $25 per person budget. We make sure the gifts are thoughtful and personal, but we can't compete with my siblings' expensive items. This creates an awkward dynamic where our gifts seem cheap in comparison, even though we put a lot of thought into them. Last month, we were all having dinner at my parents' house on a Sunday. We do this about twice a month. The conversation turned to home buying. Jonah was talking about the house he and his wife bought 2 years ago. It's a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house in a good neighborhood. He mentioned that my parents helped him with the down payment. That was a surprise to me, not because I wouldn't expect it, but because I didn't know about it. I asked him how much they had contributed. Jonah looked uncomfortable but admitted it was $40,000. Rachel interjected, saying she received the same amount when she bought her house last year. Abba said she wasn't ready to buy yet, but she knew the money would be there when she needed it. My parents had given each of my siblings $40,000 for their house down payments. My wife and I have been renting an apartment for 3 years, saving every possible cent. We've managed to put together $25,000, but houses in our area require between $35,000 and $50,000 for a down payment. I asked my parents if they planned to help us too. My dad said they would love to, but their financial situation was difficult. My mom suggested we look for a condo or a smaller house. The conversation continued, but I couldn't stop thinking about the numbers. Between college, cars, weddings, and houses, my parents had given each of my siblings over $300,000. To me, they gave $8,000 for community college tuition. What really bothered me wasn't just the money, it was the attitude that came with it. My siblings acted as if they had achieved everything through their own effort and by making good decisions. Jonah once gave me a lecture about the importance of investing early for retirement. He was saving $500 a month in his 401k. What he didn't mention was that he could afford to do so because he had no student loans or car payments, and because our parents had paid for his wedding and his house down payment. Rachel frequently posted on social media about her success. She never acknowledged that her dream job, which paid $25,000 a year, was only possible because she had no financial obligations thanks to our parents' support. This brings us to 3 weeks ago. We were having another family dinner, and somehow the conversation turned to financial planning. Abba was asking for advice on how to budget as a recent graduate. Jonah began to explain the importance of having an emergency fund. He said that everyone should have 6 months of expenses saved as a safety net. Rachel agreed and mentioned that she had managed to save $1,000 in her emergency fund. My parents praised both of them for being so responsible with money. I couldn't help it. I pointed out that it was easy to build an emergency fund when you don't have student loan payments, car payments, or any other debt. I mentioned that my wife and I were still paying off my student loans and trying to save for a house at the same time. Then, Jonah said that everyone faces challenges and makes decisions. He suggested that maybe I should have chosen a less expensive option for my second degree instead of going into debt. That comment didn't sit well with me. I had chosen the cheapest option available to me. I went to a state university. I lived in the most affordable apartment I could find and worked while studying. Meanwhile, he went to an expensive private university and didn't work a single day while studying. I told him it was easy to make smart financial decisions when someone else is paying all your bills. Rachel defended him, saying that our parents had helped all of us equally, just in different ways. She pointed out that I had received technical training that led directly to employment, which was valuable. That was technically true, but it ignored the enormous difference in amounts of money. My training cost $8,000. Their studies cost over $200,000 each. The value was not remotely equivalent. Abba tried to mediate and suggested we change the subject, but I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fair. I asked my parents directly why there was such a huge difference in the support they had given their children. My dad said they had done their best to help each of us according to our individual needs and interests. My mom added that they had always tried to be fair, even if the amounts weren't exactly equal. I asked them what was fair about giving 3 children almost $300,000 each and the fourth only $8,000. My dad said they had never seen it that way and hadn't realized the amounts were so different. The conversation ended awkwardly with my parents saying they needed to think about what I had said. My siblings were clearly annoyed with me for making the atmosphere uncomfortable. My wife and I left shortly after. I've been thinking about this situation nonstop for the last 3 weeks. My wife completely supports me and agrees that the treatment has been unfair. She has witnessed my siblings making condescending comments. I don't know what to do now. The financial disparity is one thing, but the attitude that comes with it is what really bothers me. My siblings genuinely believe they earned everything they have through their effort and smart decisions. They don't recognize the enormous head start they had. When they give advice on money management or professional success, they completely ignore the role our parents' support played in their achievements. I keep wondering if I'm wrong for bringing this up. Maybe I should be grateful for what I received and focus on building my own life, but it's hard to ignore such an obvious double standard, especially when it's thrown in my face every time we have family gatherings. Update 1. I wanted to provide an update because I see that's what's customary here. New things have come up, and I don't think they'd fit in an edit to my original post. If you haven't read it, I'll leave a link for you to do so. A few days after my post, my mother called me and asked if we could have lunch to talk about our conversation at the family dinner. She started by saying that she had been reflecting on what I told her. She said that she and my dad had never intended to treat any of their children unfairly. She explained that they had made decisions based on what each child needed at the time, not with a premeditated plan to favor some over others. I listened to her explanation, but it didn't make much sense. She said that Jonah needed a lot of support because he was the first child and they wanted to make sure he succeeded. That Rachel needed help because she worked in the nonprofit sector, which doesn't pay well. That Abba needed support because she was the youngest, and by the time she went to college, they had more resources available. When I asked where that left me, she said that I had always been so independent and capable that they thought I would do well on my own. In fact, she said they were proud of how well I had managed without much help. This explanation frustrated me even more. Basically, they were saying they gave me less support because I was self-sufficient, while they gave more to my siblings because they needed it. It was as if I was being punished for being responsible. I told her that the numbers didn't lie, even if their intentions were good. The result was that my siblings received 40 times more financial support than I did. She admitted that the numbers were probably correct, but said that focusing on money wasn't the right way to look at family relationships. I replied that love can't be measured with money, but financial support can. I pointed out that my siblings had benefited enormously from financial support, which allowed them to start their adult lives debt-free and with significant advantages. The conversation ended with my mother saying that she needed to talk to my father about the situation. She asked me not to discuss this with my siblings until the two of them had a chance to process it. 2 days later, my dad called me. He was much more direct than my mother. He said he understood that I was upset about the financial differences, but that he wanted me to consider the bigger picture. He explained that supporting children goes beyond spending equal amounts of money. He said that while they had financially supported their other children, they had supported me with love, and that was something that couldn't be bought, but that wasn't true either. Then he tried to reason with me about my community college program, saying it had been a smart investment that led directly to a good job. He pointed out that many university graduates struggle to find work, while I had worked consistently since finishing my training. My dad concluded by saying that he hoped I could get over this and focus on the positive aspects of our family relationships, which I understood as, "Get over it, your siblings matter more to us." Last weekend, my wife and I were at Abba's apartment helping her move some furniture. Abba had been quiet with me since the family dinner, and I could tell she felt uncomfortable with the whole situation. While we were taking a break, she asked to talk privately. We went out onto the balcony, and she told me something. She said that 2 years ago, when I was finishing my business degree, she overheard a conversation between my parents and Jonah. They were discussing whether they should offer me help with my student loans, as I was having difficulty making payments while also saving for the wedding. According to Abba, Jonah advised them not to help me. My brother's justification was that I didn't need it, and they might need that money in the future. Abba said, "My parents seemed inclined to help you until Jonah made those comments." After that conversation, they decided not to offer any assistance. It meant that my parents had considered helping me, but that my own brother convinced them not to. Jonah had actively worked to prevent me from receiving the same support he enjoyed his whole life. Abba also told me that Jonah had made similar comments when my parents discussed contributing to my wedding. I asked Abba why she was telling me all this now. She said she had been feeling guilty for 2 years, but that after the dinner, she couldn't bear it anymore. She realized how unfair all of this was, especially since she didn't know that our parents had given me almost nothing compared to them. On Monday, I called my parents and asked to have another conversation. I told them what Abba had told me and asked if it was true. My mother confirmed that they had indeed considered helping me with my student loans, but ultimately decided not to. They have apologized for all this, for listening to Jonah, but I think they still believe it was the right thing to do because they say that, being the oldest and most experienced, he has financial knowledge that should be heeded. I was not wrong when I said my older brother was the most favored among the favorites. Update 2. I needed to have a direct conversation with him about the topic. I called Jonah and told him that Abba had told me about his conversations with our parents regarding financial support for me. I asked him to explain his reasoning. His explanation clarified absolutely nothing for me. It only showed me the mental damage that being the golden child causes. To him, I had demonstrated that I didn't need the money, and therefore, it had been the correct decision. While I was telling him that he could have demonstrated the same, but by receiving everything on a silver platter, he hadn't had the opportunity. The conversation ended badly with Jonah telling me that I was ungrateful and that I focused too much on money instead of valuing the non-financial support the family provided. I replied that it was very easy for him to minimize money as if it were nothing, because it had always been very easy for him to get it, and he had never worked for it. After my confrontation with Jonah, it wasn't long before it reached Rachel. She called me a few days later and said she thought I was being unfair to Jonah and our parents. Her perspective was that our parents had done their best for all of us, and that comparing amounts of money was petty and divisive. I tried to explain to Rachel that Jonah's experience was completely different from mine because he had never faced real financial challenges, but she didn't seem interested in any of this. This conversation made me realize that Rachel was as disconnected from reality as Jonah regarding the advantages they had received. Things got worse when Rachel apparently shared our conversation with our parents. That same night, my mother called me and said she was disappointed that I had attacked Jonah. She said everyone was worried about me and feared that resentment was poisoning my relationships with the people who loved me most. She suggested that perhaps my wife and I should consider talking to a professional to work through these issues. I replied that I was not interested in changing my attitude toward unfair treatment. I only wanted recognition that the treatment had been unfair. My mother said that she and my father were willing to make things right by helping us financially. Now she offered to give us money for a house down payment or to help pay off my remaining student loans. At first, this seemed like a step forward, but then she added that she hoped this gesture would allow us to let go of negative feelings and return to a normal family relationship. That condition made the offer feel more like a bribe than a true act of recognition. Basically, she was offering me money to stop complaining about the unequal treatment. I told her I needed to think about it and talk to my wife. When I told my wife what my mother had said, she had the same reaction as I did. The offer seemed manipulative, not genuine. For my wife, accepting money with conditions would probably worsen things in the long run. If we accepted the offer and then continued to have problems with the family dynamic, which was very possible, they would use this as proof that they had done the right thing. I called my mother and told her that while I appreciated the gesture, I didn't feel comfortable accepting money that was conditional. My mother seemed hurt and said she didn't understand what else I wanted from them. I told her what I wanted was recognition that the treatment had been unfair, not simply a payment for the problem to disappear. This led to another difficult conversation where my mother said that all parents make mistakes, but that she and my father always acted with good intentions. I acknowledged that their intentions might have been good, but I pointed out that what really matters is the impact of their actions. The conversation ended with my mother saying she was disappointed that her offer hadn't been enough to repair our relationship. What did she expect? She hoped I would reconsider and think about what really matters in life. After rejecting my parents' conditional offer, family gatherings became very tense. Jonah and Rachel were clearly frustrated with me for not accepting our parents' peace offering. Abba, on the other hand, seemed to understand my stance better. After dinner, she pulled me aside and told me she thought I had done well to reject the conditional offer. She said that our parents were trying to buy their way out of responsibility instead of truly facing the problem. In any case, it became clear that the family dynamic is more toxic than I had perceived, and that simply having conversations about fairness will not be enough to fix the underlying problems. Update 3. A month ago, we had Abba's graduation dinner. My parents organized a celebration at a very nice restaurant. The whole family was present, including relatives I hadn't seen in a while. During dinner, my uncle asked Abba what her plans were after graduation. She mentioned that she was going to take some time to travel around Europe for 6 weeks before starting to look for a job. He asked her how she was going to pay for the trip, and Abba casually mentioned that it was a graduation gift from our parents. I later found out that this Europe trip was costing my parents about $12,000, including flights, hotels, and spending money. After dinner, I asked my parents to talk privately. I told them that these gifts were not helping them, nor were they helping my siblings. They were just spoiling them, and this would end badly. My father's response was that Abba's trip was a one-time graduation gift, not constant financial support. He said it was different from helping with debts or regular expenses. I pointed out that my other siblings received constant one-time gifts, so it could be considered constant help. My mother pointed out that they were proud that Abba had finished college and that they wanted to celebrate her achievement. She suggested that I was being negative and ruining Abba's special moment by bringing up these issues. That response made me realize that nothing was going to change. My parents were going to continue treating my siblings generously. I no longer even cared if they didn't give me money. It was the fact that they were raising entitled people. I told my parents that I needed to step back from family gatherings for a while and focus on my own life with my wife. My mother was upset because, according to her, I was hurting the whole family with my attitude. My father was more direct. He said I was acting like a child and needed to mature and get over it. He added that successful people don't go around complaining about what they didn't receive. They focus on building their own success, but none of my siblings build their own success. After that dinner, I decided to limit my contact with my parents, Jonah and Rachel. I still talk to Abba regularly because she has been understanding and supportive throughout this situation, even though she is still spoiled by my parents and doesn't see it. We've had a conversation about this, but she says this will be the last, and then she'll start her own life. I believe that never truly goes away. There's the example of my other siblings who, even with careers and that supposed success, still receive support from my parents in one way or another. Abba told me that after I left Abba's graduation dinner early, Jonah and Rachel spent the rest of the night complaining about me. My parents have contacted me a couple of times to try to convince me to come back to family gatherings. They've also mentioned that my absence makes everything uncomfortable for others. They've asked me what they would need to do for me to participate in family events again. My proposal is to have a conversation involving everyone where it's acknowledged that they have been unfair, that it's clear to everyone. I don't even care about the money anymore, just that. So far, they haven't been willing to do so because they believe we should put everything behind us and that we shouldn't involve my siblings in this. Jonah and Rachel haven't contacted me at all, which tells me everything I need to know about their priorities and their understanding of the situation. My wife and I are building our own life based on our values and priorities. Abba still keeps in contact with me. She's the only one of my close family with whom we have some kind of relationship. I think she's the most salvageable of them all, because even though she's still influenced by my parents and their gifts, she's the one who has at least started to question things. Not completely, but it's a step. Rachel and Jonah, not even that. That's how things are now, and I don't regret the decision I've made. Update 4. Everything has fallen apart quite quickly for my family. I expected that in 10 or 15 years my parents and siblings would suffer because of how they've been their whole lives, but I never imagined that in just 2 years things would get so bad for them. My parents' income depended mostly on my father. Although my mother worked, his job accounted for 90% of the family's income. He had always held a very good executive position at a company, and that covered all expenses, including those of my siblings. But the company was sold 8 months ago, and the new owners decided to restructure and cut costs, starting with the executive leadership, whose salaries were very high. This led to my father losing his job, and with it came a harsh realization. They didn't have as much money as they thought. A large part of the generous expenses they made for years were financed by selling stock that my father received as part of his employment, but those stocks were sold to cover all the expenses I've already talked about. So his layoff came with a severance package that wasn't that large. My father has already found another job, but nowadays companies seek efficiency, and having highly paid employees no longer fits that model. This has forced them to cut expenses everywhere. To start, my parents had to sell their house and move into a smaller one because they could no longer afford the mortgage on the house they had bought a few years ago. The money transfers to my siblings, Rachel and Jonah, which were still progressing thanks to my parents' help, also stopped. Fortunately, I managed to get Abba out of their influence and encouraged her to become more independent. Let's just say I was able to capitalize on the doubts she already had about all of this. She got a job after her trip to Europe and has been living on her own ever since. Rachel and Jonah, however, not so much. Rachel had to leave her nonprofit job and look for one that paid more. Her husband had also grown accustomed to the monthly money my parents sent. At least they've been able to keep their house, unlike Jonah, who had to put his up for sale, just like my parents. They've all had to face reality. When the easy money runs out, you have to work and make an effort. They are not in poverty, but they have started accumulating credit card debt. At least my parents were right about one thing. They gave me a better education than my siblings. Because if I had received the same kind of financial help as them, I would probably be just as trapped now. My parents called me throughout this apocalypse because for them, it truly has been one. Their lifestyle has declined significantly, and my siblings barely talk to them for various reasons. The most spoiled ones because they no longer receive money, and Abba because she distanced herself a bit from them by becoming more independent. For them, this is an apocalypse. They sought to repair our relationship, perhaps even to ask for money, I don't know. But my response was something like, "You should go ask Jonah for financial advice." Until now it had worked so well for you all. Everyone was swimming in wealth and everything was perfect. You should go back to that. Since then, we have had no further contact.